Welcome to the inaugural edition of Writer's Corner. I'm Alan Miller. I hope to be the silent moderator of this show, and we have with us two wonderful writers. Hopefully once a month we will get together with some really outstanding writers. We are blessed in Minnesota because we have more fine writers, novelists, than proportionately we have any right to have. And we hope that they're going to share some of their expertise with you. Behind me are a whole series of books that were written by some of these people, including one of my own, and we'll get to that. To my left, Christine Husom. Christine has got a very unique background. She was, for a long period of time, with the Wright County Sheriff's Office. She's just finished 10 years as a commissioner in, I think, what county? Stearns?
Wright County.
In Wright County.
Wright County.
Yeah, Wright County.
And she has written
that hellhole.
a lot of books, including a Winnebago County series of books, mysteries. She's been nominated for the Minnesota Book Award. She has all sorts of credits to her background, and I'm really pleased to have her with us today for this inaugural session.
Oh, I'm great.
On my right is, what can I say, David Housewright. David has won just about everything that you can win.
No.
He's won the
there's a lot of stuff I haven't won yet.
He's won the Edgar Award. He's won 3 Minnesota Book Awards. He was president of the Private Eye Writers of America. Not only that, he is more responsible for my book, which sits over my shoulder here.
No, don't put that on me.
Than anybody.
Stop it.
He did a critique of my first draft that was devastating.
But you had it coming.
But I forged on, and I will forever be in his debt. He has a new book coming out, which I hope he will talk about in about a month. And Christine and David, the floor is yours.
Oh. Well, it's great to be here and be sitting across from one of my good friends for a number of years now. We're trying to remember when we even met, but I think it was at a bookstore, perhaps.
Probably.
Yeah.
I just did a tour of public libraries through southeastern Minnesota, and which is one of the things I love to do. I love libraries. And I met this couple who were actually taking notes because they wanted to write a book in Albert Lea. And they asked the question, there are 2 questions you always get. Mm-hmm. The first is, where do your ideas come from? Mm-hmm. The second, though, is, do you outline?
Are you a plotter or a pantser?
Now, I'm an outliner. When I first started, I outlined in great detail. And that's because when I wrote my first novel, the first published novel, I owned an advertising agency in St. Paul, my partner and I. And writing time was at a premium. You know, you're putting in 60-hour weeks sometimes. So I outlined everything so I always knew where I was. So I never stared at my screen going, God, what was I thinking? I always knew where I was. I knew what I had to research. I knew the people I had to talk to and the places I had to go. So it was always in front of me. My outlines aren't nearly as detailed now that I'm writing full-time at home than they were then, because most of it's in my head. But I always know what the hell's going on. I always know how the book is going to end before I begin. And when I meet people like you who don't do that, I am shocked.
Actually, when I start, first of all, I've been thinking about it for a while, but I know what the crime is. I know who my bad guy is. I know how it has to end. So I do know that. I don't necessarily know the details of that, but I've also think of kind of a subplot to weave in to the story. So it's not just going after, the criminal and the crime. So I've always got kind of a little subplot. But yeah, I've mentioned this, and you were kind of said, no, that's not right. E.L. Doctorow wrote that writing a novel is like driving in the night in the fog. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. And that's really where I'm at. A lot of times, when I'm writing, I feel like I'm with my characters. I'm watching them. I'm listening to what they're, saying. I'm listening to their voices. And sometimes something new will occur to me. Oh yeah, like let's work this in. So yeah, it's.
You mentioned E.L. Doctorow. Ragtime's my favorite book.
Oh yeah.
I love E.L. Doctorow. I also love Elmore Leonard. I had the great privilege of meeting Elmore Leonard, and he told me to call him Dutch, so I get to call Elmore Leonard Dutch. And and he wrote, for those of you who don't know, he wrote the books that became the Justified TV series. He wrote Out of Sight. He wrote The Moonshine Wars. He wrote Get Shorty. He wrote all these great crime novels. Before that, he wrote westerns. He wrote Hombre. He wrote 3:10 to Yuma. He wrote Valdez is Coming, Last Stand at Sabre River, that sort of thing.
He was a unique talent. He really was.
He was, and he's just a gracious gentleman. And we're sitting in the bar drinking non-alcoholic beers because he didn't drink, but he did smoke. And apparently, this was the only place in Colorado he was allowed to. So we're sitting there chatting, and I asked him, if he was working on something, and he said he was. He was about 25 pages in, and I said, "What's it about?" And he said, "I don't know yet." And I was shocked. This is my hero. This is the guy I probably emulate more than any other writer. And completely different way of doing things. And clearly it worked pretty well for Mr.
Yeah,
Leonard. But
it's, everyone has a different style and a different process, and that's what's kind of fun to hear what their process is. And I mean, I tried to outline, I just can't do it. And I tried to storyboard. In fact, I took a class at the Loft where it was write a book in 6 months, and the author did storyboarding. So you had 12 boxes, or you could do 16, but the first box was, what is the question this book asks, and what's the answer to the question is the last box. And it's like, okay, I filled in like 3 boxes. I just couldn't do it. So
that's one way to do. Tammy Hogue, who's a Minnesota girl. Mm-hmm. She told me years ago, we were talking, and she outlines even more than I do. I haven't spoken to her for a while, so maybe she's changed her process, but she'll change the book halfway through. She'll make it like impossible for the bad guy to have been guilty. Because she says if she can surprise herself, she shouldn't have any trouble surprising a reader.
Wow.
Okay. I'm not that guy. I believe in, you said something will come to you as you're writing. I believe in the joy of surprise, I call it, where you're writing something and then you get an idea and you go, oh, what if I did this? Mm-hmm. And I'm not telling anybody that when you outline a book or storyboard it or whatever, you follow it precisely. But I'm saying this is how you propel yourself down the trolley and track, and if you can veer off to a better place, by all means. Mm-hmm. But this way you know where you're going. Lawrence Block who I've also had the pleasure of knowing, you know, he never outlines, but he always knows how the book ends. So that everything can be funneled to that ending with impact.
Yep.
I mean, there's so many, how many great books have you written that have lousy endings?
Yeah.
And it's because the writer's got, you know, 80, 90,000 words, and he's, I got to wrap this sucker up. He doesn't know how it ends any more than you do.
Yeah, there's actually some authors that don't know who the bad guy is or who done it. It's like, so no, that's not me. I have to know that because I'm building, like you said, toward the end. I might not know the exact details of the end, but I know how it has to end.
I hear people, you know, on TV, and I hear people giving interviews, and they say, well, I wanted to do one thing, but my character wouldn't let me. And I'm like, what? I mean, first of all, who's in charge here?
Yeah.
And second, the characters are there to serve the book. The reason you created them was to tell this story. And if that character, and I get it, because you change the character and you write them such a way, and then you realize maybe they wouldn't do that. Well, my answer to that is to go back and rewrite the character so they would do that, because that's why they're in the book, to do a thing or say a thing at a certain time in a certain place to move the story forward. So when people tell me that, I'm like, do you have any idea what your book's about? And half the time, apparently not.
What about rewrites? Do you do a lot of rewrites?
I have never rewritten a book. Oh, that's not true. I rewrote one. You get a lot of people that, and this is true, I believe, of just about everybody who just sits down and writes. Excuse me. Because they figure it out as they go along, so they got to go back and rewrite and make changes and go back again and forth and this sort of thing. I don't. My book goes, you know, it's linear. I know what it's going to do, and what I'll do is I will, if I write 1,000 words today, tomorrow I'll go back and rewrite those 1,000 words, and then I'll write another 1,000. So I'm always going like this. I'm always polishing what I wrote and moving forward and moving forward and moving forward. And if I make a change in chapter 14, oh, hey, I got an idea. This is an idea. Let's do this. Then I will go back to chapter 6 and make the adjustments immediately so that it works. So when I hit the end, it's over. It's done. And I have had 6 editors from 5 different publishing houses, and I have never been asked to make changes that took me longer than an afternoon. And I like to think it's craftsmanship, you know. But really, it's the process. This is my process, and because of that, you know, you can argue that I got 18 drafts of chapter 1 because that's how many times I'll go through it as I'm writing the book. But
yeah, I do the same thing. I will go back to like the day before or whenever the last time I wrote, and I'll reread that and do, you know, my editing then. And I am one that if I get to a point in the story, it's like, oh, I need to go back and introduce either this character or this clue or something. So I'm kind of constantly doing that also, but not every day, but often I'll go back.
I think that's just part of the process.
Yeah, it is. It is for me. Yeah, some people they'll just sit down, they'll write it, and then they, you know, they'll say, well, this is my however many draft, and I'm the same way. It's I don't know what my first draft is because it's a continual thing.
A lot of people say, I don't know how you undertake this. And I don't know, in discussions I've had with them, I just said, sit down and write. Because if you don't sit down and write, and then you have to share it someplace with somebody or something, as I shared my novel with you, and it was torn to shreds, but a good novel came out of it. And it's gotten some, you know, really good feedback. So I think you have to write.
Yep.
No matter how bad it is, you have to write.
Well, and, you know, I think this has been credited to different authors, but Hemingway is one. I only write when I feel like it, and every time I sit down in front of my typewriter, I feel like it. So, you know, it's just like anything else you do. You may not feel like it, but yeah, you do it, and you work through that process.
You know, we're talking about, you know, do you outline, do you not outline, do you do a variation thereof, that sort of thing. Just about everybody I know in the business has a different system.
Mm-hmm.
You got Kruger, who gets up early in the morning to write, you know, in longhand, for God's sake. And I know people who will do,
He'll be
you know,
here
I
next
have to
month,
wray.
by the way.
Excuse me?
He'll be here next month, by the
Well,
way.
tell him I said hi.
Okay.
The heck. No, but everybody has their own system. I know people who they're going to sit down at like 10 o'clock at night and they're going to write until 2 in the morning or whatever. Kruger gets up early, he writes into the morning. Some people write so many words a day, 1,000 words a day. I try to write 5,000 words a week. And sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, but that's the goal. The point I'm trying to make is whatever system you have that gets you to finish the book is a good system. I remember Kruger and I did this event at the grand reopening of the Roseville Public Library. They shut it down, they revamped it. And we're talking to Carrie Miller from NPR, and she asked, and for all these people, says, what's the difference between us and them? Well, the answer is we will find a way to finish the book, while everybody else will find a way not to. You know, the job's a hassle. You know, the kids are sick. I got to do this. I got to do that. They'll find a way not to do it. The day my father died, I wrote 3 pages.
Oh, wow.
They sucked. But I wrote 3
What
pages.
you wrote.
Because that's what you do. You have to do that. And so anybody who does it, anybody, I don't care how you do it. If you do it, you're on, you know, you got nothing but love for me. Because it's not as easy as most people think it is.
No, it's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea of how many words you're going to write when you write?
It says so on my contract. It says, and I go, oh, okay. And I'm always sure it's going to be short. I'm always convinced of this. I'm always pacing in front of in my living room going, oh God, what am I going to do? I can't pad it. What am I going to do, add a chapter? I mean, you know, short story in the middle of the thing, I can't, you know. But it never is. It's almost always over the amount by about 1,000 words, and I have no idea where that comes from.
And we're talking about how many words?
80 to 85,000.
Yeah, that's where mine are. I think there's a couple that are around 90,000, but that's sort of the goal when I'm thinking too, 80, 85,000. So, and somehow it happens. Maybe not just somehow, because, you know, you kind of, I think after you've written a few too, you get to the pace and you kind of get a sense of what you have to add to make it that many words or whatever. But
I mentioned Lawrence Block earlier. You know, you're in high school. You know, they talk about a play, they talk about a movie, they talk about a book having a beginning, a middle, and an end. And he doesn't think that's particularly useful. What he does is he breaks a book into 3 parts. He calls it the snare, the joyride, and the payoff.
Ah.
And the snare, they're not equal parts. The snare, you know, he'll say it's like 5,000 words, and this is what you're writing early in the book to get your reader on the trolley car and send them down the track. And then he says you got to have the good payoff, where all that work and all that energy that's being not put by the author but by the reader gets paid off at the end. And he says that should be another 5,000 words. Says where books go to die is that big 70,000 words in the middle, where you're trying to get the character from A, you know, to Z. And I think that's what happens with writers who quit, they don't quit in the beginning. They quit in the middle because they don't know where they're going. And that's another reason why especially for first-time writers, I encourage outlining. So you can figure it out. And you have a place to go, and you know what you want to do. So when you get to 30,000 words, you don't sit there staring at the screen going, God, now what? This way you have something to work with.
What about creating subplots in terms of bringing them to fruition along the way until you get to the final?
Well, to me, a subplot has to be pertinent to the main plot. I don't like subplots where they're just there. They're a different story that's taking place while you're doing this. You know, I don't need family drama while my guy is trying to find an arsonist or whatever. Unless the family drama is somehow directly connected to that. To me, that's padding. To me, that's somebody trying to get their 80,000 words in. So,
and it depends on what you're doing with your characters too, I think, because for me, my characters are involved with the plot, but they're also involved with the subplot. So it's
that's true too.
Yep, and their little personal lives, and there's some. I think, you know, when particular with a series, people, one of the main reasons they read them is because they like your characters, and they want to see what they're going to be up to next. I mean, that's I think a big part of it. So, I mean, how do you create characters, David, when you're thinking of, I mean, you've got, your main characters, you've known them for a lot of years. Is that part of the outlining process, or is that a different process?
If you're writing a series, you are familiar with the characters. You don't have to reinvent them, and you're certainly familiar with the settings. Although I like to move my guy around so I can explore different settings, but.
Well, you have series where your main characters, you have several series where your main characters have different personalities.
Yeah.
So if you're going to one personality, that might be Mackenzie, and if it's another personality, it might be one of your others.
Yeah. And there are processes. I tend to read the books earlier when I want to get my head into a different character or a different series, so I can remember, oh yeah, I remember this guy. But, excuse me, my subplots aren't necessarily there to explore the character. We're exploring the character through what he's doing with the main story. And that's another thing. I mean, I'm not a big believer in subplots that are not directly related to the main plot. If I can cut this out, if I can take this out without it affecting the story, it shouldn't be there. You know, that's my rule. Yep. If it doesn't move the story along or reveals something significant about the major character, it goes. And that's just the way I do it. I know that some other people have other systems, but that's my thing.
Yeah, I think definitely the subplot has to help move the story along. I mean, I kind of weave them together in a way, but yeah, it's for, you know, you see your characters in action, and they've got not just this one thing going on, but they've got this other thing going on too. So that's the way I kind of look at subplots.
Well, that's true. I mean, you can't, they're living lives. But that's always annoyed me when all of a sudden the author veers off to tell me something about, these characters that have nothing to do with that main story.
It's distracting.
And said, well, we're exploring the character, and I'm like, I don't care. Tell me, this is what I was reading, right? The guys, God, who the hell was it? I can't remember the name of the author, but he wrote The Carpetbaggers, and he wrote Nevada Smith.
I can't think either.
Oh, his name just went out of my head. He was very big kind of pulp writer. Well, the Carpetbaggers and Nevada Smith were the same book. He wrote the first third of the book to a point. Then we got the story of Nevada Smith, and then we pick up where we left off and finish the Carpetbaggers. You know, as we're walking out of the studio, I'll be screaming the name at the walls, but
Yeah.
you know, look them up. And don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's amazing, you know, the different techniques that people use. But so as an outliner, when you're thinking about, you know, introducing your new characters, you've got your bad guys, is that part of your outline process? You're developing that character and your, you know, who they
Well,
are?
I know
kind of
why
thing?
they're there.
Okay, yep.
They're there for a specific reason.
Mm-hmm.
They're there to do a thing, or say a thing, or, you know, something.
Yep.
So that's where I start. And then I go back, okay, who is this person? Man, woman, government official, you know, henchman, who is he? And then I expand it this way. But it's always based on why he's there.
Yep.
And that's why when I hear writers say, well, my character wouldn't let me do that, I'm like,
My characters do surprise me, but, you know, it's usually in a good way.
Well, life is full of
Right, I
surprises
mean,
anyway.
it's like, I'm kind of sitting at my computer's like, Corky, I cannot believe you did that. So it'll be, you know, not a major thing in the whole plot, but yeah, it's kind of fun when that happens, I think. So, and I had taken gone to a workshop one time, and this really helped me with my second series, but we did a worksheet, and it's what a character, and so it's like this long list of qualities. So it's, you know, their name, their age, their hobbies, their education, their friends, their family, do they have a pet? I mean, what's their best memory? What's their worst memory? What's their goal? What's the obstacle to that goal? And that really helped me when I sat down to write the Snow Globe Shop Mysteries, because I had my main characters, and I had to, you know, you have a year to write the book, and so then it comes out a whole year later. And it was really helpful for me to go back and, oh yes, okay, that's his.
I guess
that's
different
his.
strokes for different folks.
Exactly. So that
What
was.
we've been doing here on this inaugural of the Writer's Corner is an attempt to bring in some of Minnesota's best writers to share with the readers in our network, which is really the Access to Democracy network of 35 cities, plus we're sitting here in Eagan, and we were very fortunate to have Christine Husom and our old standby, David Housewright, with us. I want to thank you for tuning in. Next month, we'll be back with Carl Brookins and William Kent Kruger.
Kruger. I should tell you one of my stories.
And this is Alan Miller thanking you for sharing your time with us.